Get ready to burn rubber and kick up some arcade dust as we take a thrilling drive through some of the greatest racing games to ever hit the arcade scene. From the sun-soaked streets of Outrun to the pedal to the metal action of Daytona USA, these games made sure that if your wallet wasn't empty, your fuel tank was. Buckle up as we race through the top 25 arcade racing games that revved up our hearts and left skid marks on our childhoods. And hey, we might even get a little crazy. Taxi crazy. Outrun, 1989. There's just something timeless about the feeling of zooming down a sunny coastal highway in a Ferrari, and Outrun captured that magic perfectly. Released in 1989, this game wasn't just about racing, it was about freedom, choice, and pure adrenaline-fueled escapism. Players didn't just follow a single rigid track. No, Outrun gave you options. Branching paths at key points that let you choose your own adventure. Do you want to glide past palm trees and ocean waves? Or do you prefer taking the road through misty mountains? Each route offered a different flavour of speed and challenge, making every playthrough feel unique. The iconic Ferrari Testarossa was more than just a flashy vehicle. It was the stuff of dreams for arcade goers. And with the game's vibrant, colourful graphics and ultra-smooth scaling techniques, you felt like you were racing through a living postcard. The sense of speed was incredible for its time, giving players the thrill of being on the open road without actually risking a speeding ticket. What really elevated Outrun, though, was the immersive atmosphere. The music. Oh, the music. With tracks like Magical Sound Shower and Splash Wave, it wasn't just about racing to beat the clock, it was about doing so while vibing to some of the catchiest tunes ever to come out of an arcade. These melodies are still stuck in our heads decades later, and for good reason. The pressure was always on, with the ticking clock adding that extra dose of tension. The more skillful you were at dodging traffic and nailing those sharp turns, the further you could push, reaching new areas before the timer hit zero. Outrun was not just a race against other cars, it was a race against time and your own limits. And let's not forget the deluxe moving cabinet, an arcade attraction in itself, making you feel every bump and turn as if you were truly behind the wheel. Daytona USA, 1993. Arcades were never quite the same after Daytona USA roared onto the scene. Released in 1993, this game didn't just bring racing to arcades. It brought NASCAR-level intensity. The moment you hit the gas pedal, you were met with a rush of speed that felt unmatched at the time, thanks to Sega's revolutionary use of 3D polygonal graphics. These weren't your typical flat, pixelated tracks. Daytona USA featured detailed race courses with banked curves, tunnels, and a dynamic crowd cheering you on. Speaking of the crowd, do you remember how they'd chant your name when you crossed the finish line? It made you feel like an actual racing superstar. What set Daytona USA apart, though, was the control. The game introduced the now iconic 8-speed manual shift, and mastering those gear shifts was essential if you wanted to dominate the track. Sure, you could drive in automatic, but where's the fun in that? Learning when to upshift and downshift was the key to taking those sharp corners without spinning out like a newbie. And let's not forget the unforgettable soundtrack. Rolling Start is still a battle cry for anyone who grew up with this game. It's an instant nostalgia hit that takes you back to the roaring engines and pixelated skies of the arcade. The tracks were cleverly designed, with 3.7 Speedway being a fan favourite, offering just the right mix of straights and curves to test your skills. Whether you were slamming your car into the wall trying to make that perfect turn, or vying for the top spot in a heated multiplayer match, Daytona USA had something for every racing fan. Plus, that multiplayer mode? An absolute game changer. Up to 8 players could compete head-to-head in linked arcade cabinets, turning friendly rivalry into full-blown bragging rights. Daytona USA wasn't just a race, it was an experience that left tire marks on the arcade world.
Let's go! Crazy Taxi!
Crazy Taxi, 1999. Few arcade games could match the pure, chaotic energy of Crazy Taxi. Released in 1999, this game was the definition of adrenaline-fueled mayhem, putting players behind the wheel of a yellow cab with one goal in mind: get your passengers to their destination as quickly and recklessly as possible. But this wasn't your standard city driving sim. Nope. Crazy Taxi was all about rule breaking, shortcuts, and jumping off ramps like a maniac to shave precious seconds off the clock. The city itself was a sprawling playground filled with obstacles to dodge, ramps to launch off, and hilariously animated pedestrians narrowly escaping your bumper. Each passenger you picked up came with their own ticking timer, and they weren't shy about telling you to hurry up or get lost. With quirky commentary and snappy dialogue, every ride felt like a mini adventure as you raced against both the clock and your own reckless nature. The more daring you're driving, the more cash you raked in, especially if you pulled off insane stunts like near misses or massive jumps. The arcade cabinet added to the immersion with a gear shift for manual control and a steering wheel that gave you full control over your wild, erratic driving. But it wasn't just about the gameplay, the soundtrack was a whole vibe. Featuring tracks from The Offspring and Bad Religion, Crazy Taxi had a punk rock energy that fit its fast and loose style perfectly. There was no time to breathe, no time to think, just pedal to the metal as you zipped through a city where speed limits were merely suggestions. And let's not forget the memorable locations like KFC and Tower Records. This game fully embraced its product placement in a way that made the city feel real and ridiculous all at once. Few arcade games matched the sheer thrill and frantic fun of Crazy Taxi, and it's still a wild ride that leaves you grinning from ear to ear.
Ready, set, go!
Cruisin USA, 1994. Racing through national parks, iconic landmarks and urban streets, Cruisin USA felt like a road trip on steroids. Released in 1994, this arcade hit was all about big, bold fun. Unlike other races of its era, Cruisin USA was designed to be a visually stunning spectacle with vibrant backgrounds that took you from the Golden Gate Bridge to Washington, D.C. It wasn't about realism, it was about the sheer joy of tearing through iconic American landscapes at breakneck speeds. The game's graphics might look simple now, but at the time, the lush greenery, sparkling cityscapes, and sunsets made Cruisin USA stand out in any arcade. What really made this game a fan favourite, though, was its accessibility. While other races demanded precise handling and a deep understanding of mechanics, Cruisin USA kept things simple and fun, perfect for anyone who just wanted to jump in and start racing, and boy, did it nail that feeling of speed. Every time you passed a checkpoint, it felt like you were unlocking a new piece of the country, speeding your way toward that elusive first-place finish. Whether you were dodging traffic, flying over jumps, or smashing into opponents, because, let's be honest, no one plays Cruisin USA gently, there was never a dull moment. The game was also packed with plenty of flashy cars, from muscle cars to high-speed sports vehicles, letting you live out your dream of tearing through America in style. And then there were the secret vehicles. Driving an ATV or a school bus was a quirky treat that made the game even more memorable. The controls were smooth, the action was fast-paced, and every race felt like an action-packed blockbuster. No need for fancy mechanics here. Cruisin USA was all about having a blast and cruising through an over-the-top version of the USA.
Sega Rally Championship.
Sega Rally Championship, 1994. If you thought racing was just about smooth tarmac and clean streets, Sega Rally Championship was here to throw some dirt in your face, literally. Released in 1994, this arcade gem shifted gears by introducing players to the thrilling, unpredictable world of rally racing. While most arcade races focused on high-speed city streets or highways, Sega Rally put you on rugged off-road tracks with loose gravel, mud, and sand trying to pull your tyres every which way. And unlike other races, it wasn't just about going fast. It was about learning how to handle the ever-changing terrain. 1 second, you're gliding through a dirt path, and the next, you're skidding over wet pavement, forcing you to adapt on the fly. The game's physics were groundbreaking for the time, making you feel every bump and turn. But Sega Rally wasn't just about making you fight the elements. It was also about strategy. Do you pick the Lancia Delta, a beast built for stability and speed, or do you opt for the Toyota Celica, a nimble yet powerful rally car that demands precision? Each vehicle had its own strengths, and mastering them was half the fun. The game's split-screen multiplayer was the icing on the cake, letting you challenge a buddy in some good old-fashioned dirt-flinging duels. The visuals were top tier for 1994, with the off-road environments looking impressively detailed, from rocky cliffs to muddy hills. And then there was the iconic co-driver's voice calling out the turns. Easy left, medium right, adding an immersive touch that made you feel like a real rally driver trying to shave seconds off your time. Sega Rally Championship wasn't just a race, it was a battle against nature itself, and every victory felt like you earned it, covered in dirt, but grinning from ear to ear.
Ridge Racer.
Ridge Racer!
Ridge Racer, 1993. Arcade racing was never the same after Ridge Racer hit the scene in 1993, bringing with it a new level of speed, style, and, let's be real, drifting. While other games focused on traditional racing mechanics, Ridge Racer said, why not make sliding around corners at ridiculous speeds the coolest thing ever? And boy did it deliver. The game's signature drift mechanic became the cornerstone of its gameplay, allowing players to fly into turns and power slide their way to victory. It wasn't just about going fast. It was about doing it with style. Ridge Racer embraced its arcade roots with a smooth, fast-paced experience that had players on the edge of their seats. You didn't need to be a seasoned racer to enjoy it. Just hop in, floor it, and start drifting like a pro. The game's visuals were stunning for the time, with 3D polygon graphics that made the racetracks feel more immersive than ever before. Whether you were racing through tight city streets or cruising along sun-soaked highways, the sense of speed was incredible. Ridge Racer wasn't just a game, it was a spectacle. The game's energetic soundtrack, filled with techno beats and upbeat tunes, kept your adrenaline pumping as you weaved through traffic and took on sharp turns. And then there was the competition. AI racers were no slouches, keeping the challenge high as they zipped around the track, trying to steal your spot on the podium. The arcade cabinet itself was a thing of beauty, featuring a full steering wheel and pedal setup, making you feel like you were truly in control of your high-speed destiny. Plus, the addition of time trials and special rival cars to beat added an extra layer of excitement for those looking to master the game. Ridge Racer wasn't just about finishing first. It was about dominating the track with speed, precision, and style, leaving your opponents in the dust as you drifted into gaming history.
Choose your track.
Hydro Thunder, 1999. When you think of arcade racing, your mind probably jumps to cars, right? Well, Hydro Thunder decided to change the game, literally, by throwing boats into the mix. Released in 1999, Hydro Thunder wasn't just another racer, it was a high-octane, wave-crashing, adrenaline-pumping ride through some of the wildest waterways you could imagine. Whether you were blasting through Arctic caverns, navigating tropical islands, or tearing through New York Harbor, every course felt like a wild ride. But it wasn't just the locations that made Hydro Thunder stand out, it was the speed. These weren't your average boats. They were high-powered, rocket-fueled speed machines designed to defy gravity and leave massive wakes in their path. The sense of speed was unparalleled for a boat racer, with water physics that made every turn, jump and crash feel realistic. Hitting one of those boost pads, it was like strapping a jet engine to your back and launching into hyperspeed. Each course was packed with insane jumps, hidden shortcuts, and dangerous obstacles that kept you on your toes, or should I say, on your rudder. And the boats? From futuristic hydrojets to sleek speedboats, each one had its own handling and speed, giving you plenty of options to find your perfect match. But it wasn't just about racing, it was about outsmarting your opponents and mastering the water's unpredictable nature. Multiplayer was an absolute blast, especially when you were neck and neck with a friend, dodging each other's waves and trying to nail that final boost to cross the finish line first. The arcade cabinet, with its throttle control and force feedback steering, made the experience even more immersive. Hydro Thunder wasn't just a racing game, it was a wild ride on the high seas, and it left a tidal wave of memories for anyone who ever played it.
Prepare to qualify.
Pole Position, 1982. If there's one game that cemented the foundation for arcade racing, it's Pole Position. Released way back in 1982, this is the granddaddy of all arcade racing games, setting the standard for everything that came after. What made Pole Position revolutionary was its pioneering use of a Formula One-style racing experience, complete with qualifying laps and real-time racing against opponents. Players weren't just dropped into a race, they had to earn their spot by qualifying for the actual event, which added a layer of strategy to the game. You had to master the art of cornering, braking, and knowing when to hit the gas to post the best qualifying time. The better you qualified, the better your starting position, which was crucial in a game where every second counted. Once you hit the track, it was a tense battle against both the clock and your opponents, who didn't exactly play fair. One wrong move, and you could be spinning out or crashing into a billboard, effectively ending your race. Pole Position also stood out for its groundbreaking graphics. For 1982, the pseudo 3D visuals, complete with detailed race cars and vibrant backgrounds, were jaw-dropping. The game's use of a racing wheel and pedals for controls also made it feel more immersive than anything that had come before it. And who can forget the digitized voice that greeted you with "prepare to qualify"? That phrase alone could send a shiver down your spine as you gripped the wheel and prepared for action. Pole Position wasn't just an arcade game, it was a revolution in the racing genre, laying the groundwork for all the fast-paced, heart-pounding races that followed. It may seem simple by today's standards, but in 1982, Pole Position was the pinnacle of speed and excitement. Virtua Racing, 1992. Fast forward to 1992, and Virtua Racing was changing the game all over again. If Pole Position laid the foundation for arcade racing, then Virtua Racing built a skyscraper on top of it. This was one of the first arcade races to use 3D polygonal graphics, and boy, did it blow everyone's minds. Gone were the days of flat 2D sprites. Virtua Racing put you in a fully realized 3D world where every turn, straightaway, and competitor felt dynamic and alive. The sense of depth was unmatched at the time, making every race feel like a high-speed chase through a living, breathing world. The tracks themselves were a visual spectacle, from high-speed circuits to more technical courses that tested your precision driving skills. But what really made Virtua Racing stand out was its attention to detail. It wasn't just about the graphics, it was about how the game felt. Every corner required precise handling, every straight required perfect timing, and every lap felt like an accomplishment. The game also featured a cockpit view, a first for many arcade racers, allowing players to get fully immersed in the action. And let's not forget the cabinet itself, complete with a force feedback steering wheel, pedals, and even a multi-screen setup in some versions, which made it feel like you were really sitting behind the wheel of a Formula One car. Whether you were racing against the clock or against a friend in multiplayer mode, Virtua Racing was all about precision and skill. The game pushed the boundaries of what was possible in arcade racing, and even today, it's remembered as one of the true pioneers of the genre. If you were lucky enough to play it back in the day, you know just how groundbreaking it was. Outrun 2, 2003. Sequels don't always live up to the hype, but Outrun 2 managed to capture the magic of the original while adding its own modern twist. Released in 2003, this game took everything that made the first Outrun so iconic, the beautiful cars, branching paths, and vibrant scenery, and cranked it up to 11. The Ferrari Testarossa was swapped out for newer Ferrari models, including the Ferrari 360 Spider, but the heart and soul of the game remained intact. High-speed, open-road racing through some of the most breathtaking environments in gaming. Outrun 2 wasn't just about getting from point A to point B, it was about doing it with style. Players could drift around corners like pros, adding a layer of finesse that made each race feel like an art form. The game also introduced a multiplayer mode, allowing you to race head-to-head with friends and prove who was the real king of the road. But it wasn't just the gameplay that made Outrun 2 shine, it was the atmosphere. The graphics were stunning for the time, with dynamic lighting, detailed car models, and environments that made you want to stop and take in the view, if you weren't too busy trying to beat the clock, that is. The music was another high point, featuring remixes of classic tracks from the original Outrun, as well as brand new tunes that perfectly captured the game's carefree, adventurous spirit. Whether you were racing through tropical beaches, European countryside, or bustling cities, each route felt like a joyride through paradise. And much like the original, the ticking clock kept the tension high, pushing you to make every second count. Outrun 2 wasn't just a worthy sequel, it was a love letter to arcade racing, and it still stands as one of the best in the genre.
3, 2, 1, rush!
San Francisco, Rush, Extreme Racing, 1996. When it comes to arcade racing games that threw realism out the window in favor of pure, unbridled fun, San Francisco Rush, Extreme Racing is an absolute legend. Released in 1996, this game took the winding, hilly streets of San Francisco and turned them into the ultimate playground for high-speed mayhem. Unlike other races where precision and careful handling were key, San Francisco Rush was all about finding the most ridiculous shortcuts, launching your car off giant ramps, and pulling off death-defying stunts. The game's physics were wild, and that was the point. Gravity was more of a suggestion than a rule here, and your car could spend just as much time airborne as it did on the road. The tracks were filled with insane jumps, sharp turns, and hidden paths that rewarded the most daring drivers. The more you risked, the bigger the reward. Whether you were speeding through the city streets, navigating narrow cliffside roads, or blasting through underground tunnels, San Francisco Rush always kept you on the edge of your seat. And let's talk about the crashes. Oh, the glorious crashes. Flipping your car end over end after hitting a ramp at the wrong angle wasn't just a fail, it was entertainment in itself, with the game giving you slow-motion replays of your most spectacular wipeouts. The arcade cabinet also added to the experience, with its force feedback steering wheel and pedals making every jump, crash, and turn feel visceral. The game wasn't just a race, it was an adrenaline-pumping stunt show where the goal was to cross the finish line in style, or at least in one piece. San Francisco Rush didn't care about realism, it cared about giving you the most extreme, high-flying racing experience possible, and it succeeded in spades. Super Off-Road, 1989. In the world of arcade racing, Super Off-Road brought a whole new meaning to the phrase getting down and dirty. Released in 1989, this game took players off the smooth highways and placed them right into the heart of treacherous, mud-splattered tracks. Unlike the sleek, polished cars of other racers, Super Off-Road was all about monster trucks, big, bulky, and ready to tackle whatever obstacles were thrown in their path. What made this game stand out was its top-down view, giving players a bird's-eye perspective of the entire course as they navigated sharp turns, jumps, and rugged terrain. You weren't just racing against the clock, you were battling the elements, your opponents, and your own driving skills all at once. Each track was filled with tight corners, dirt ramps, and plenty of opportunities to spin out if you weren't careful. But the real genius of Super Off-Road lay in its simplicity. The controls were easy to pick up but tough to master, offering a satisfying balance between accessibility and challenge. The more you played, the more you learned the subtle art of drifting around corners and avoiding obstacles like a pro. Players could upgrade their trucks between races, boosting their speed, acceleration, and handling to get an edge over the competition. This added a strategic layer to the game, as you had to decide whether to go all in on speed or focus on better control. And with up to 3 players competing head-to-head in multiplayer mode, Super Off-Road turned every race into a chaotic, mud-slinging showdown. The arcade cabinet even featured a steering wheel and throttle that gave you that extra sense of control as you powered through each course. Super Off-Road wasn't just about winning, it was about dominating the dirt and leaving your friends in the dust, literally. Super Hang-On, 1987. Motorcycle racing got a major arcade upgrade with Super Hang-On, a game that turned the intensity of two-wheeled racing into a full-body experience. Released in 1987, this game wasn't just about going fast. It was about leaning into every curve and holding on for dear life as you raced at breakneck speeds through beautifully crafted landscapes. The unique thing about Super Hang-On was its focus on leaning mechanics. Players had to tilt their motorcycle to navigate sharp turns, creating a realistic sensation of movement, especially if you were lucky enough to play on the deluxe arcade cabinet that let you physically lean into the corners. The game's 4 different courses, Africa, Asia, America, and Europe, each offered a diverse set of challenges, from long, sweeping curves to tight, hairpin turns that demanded perfect timing and reflexes. The difficulty ramped up as you progressed, with faster competitors and more complex tracks keeping you on your toes, or your handlebars in this case. But Super Hang-On wasn't just about speed and precision, it was about style. The colourful, detailed environments zipped by as you raced through cities, deserts and forests, making every race feel like a scenic tour. At 200 miles per hour, the sense of speed was exhilarating, and the game's upbeat, synth-heavy soundtrack only added to the rush. Whether you were racing solo or competing against the clock, every moment in Super Hang-On felt like a high-stakes, white-knuckle race to the finish. And let's not forget the nitro boost. Hitting that turbo button sent your bike rocketing forward, giving you just the edge you needed to overtake your rivals or shave crucial seconds off your time. Super Hang-On wasn't just a race, it was a thrill ride, and every player who hopped on that virtual motorcycle left the arcade feeling like they had just conquered the open road. Spy Hunter, 1987. Spy Hunter wasn't your typical racing game. It was a high-octane, gadget-filled action experience straight out of a James Bond movie. Released in 1987, this game put you behind the wheel of a supercharged sports car armed to the teeth with machine guns, oil slicks, and smoke screens. Your mission? To take down enemy vehicles and avoid the forces of evil while tearing down highways at breakneck speeds. The unique blend of racing and combat made Spy Hunter an instant classic, as it wasn't just about getting from point A to point B. It was about surviving the onslaught of enemies determined to take you out. The game's top-down perspective gave players a clear view of the road ahead, filled with twists, turns, and plenty of bad guys trying to ram you off the road, but you weren't defenseless. With a press of a button, you could unleash a barrage of bullets, drop an oil slick to send your enemies skidding, or activate a smoke screen to lose them in a cloud of confusion. The sense of empowerment was huge. You weren't just racing, you were outsmarting and outgunning anyone in your way. Spy Hunter also featured iconic musical cues, with the theme song being an unforgettable rendition of the classic Peter Gunn theme. The game wasn't just about action though. Players had to be strategic, knowing when to use their weapons and when to conserve them for bigger threats. And then there was the iconic transforming truck. Drive into the back of it and you'd upgrade your vehicle with new weapons or repair any damage. The arcade cabinet, with its steering wheel and pedal setup, made the game feel even more immersive, putting you right in the driver's seat of a Hollywood-worthy chase. Spy Hunter wasn't just a race, it was a battle, and every moment behind the wheel felt like you were living out your secret agent fantasies. Star Wars Racer Arcade, 2000. If you ever dreamed of being part of the Star Wars universe, Star Wars Racer Arcade was the game that let you live out your pod racing fantasies. Released in 2000, this game put you in the cockpit of a pod racer, just like in Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and gave you the chance to blast through alien landscapes at ludicrous speeds. Unlike traditional racing games, Star Wars Racer Arcade wasn't about cars or bikes, it was about navigating massive, floating pod racers through some of the most treacherous environments in the galaxy. With tracks ranging from the sandy dunes of Tatooine to the icy caverns of Ando Prime, every race felt like a cinematic experience. But this wasn't just a typical racing game. Racer Arcade introduced a unique control scheme that made you feel like you were truly piloting a pod racer. The arcade cabinet featured 2 throttle controls that you had to push forward to accelerate, just like Anakin Skywalker in the movie. be. It was an intense, immersive experience that required both hands and a lot of focus to steer your pod racer through tight corners, avoid obstacles, and stay ahead of the competition. The sense of speed was breathtaking. Your pod racer felt like it was barely holding together as you zoomed through alien landscapes, dodging rocks, enemies, and other racers. And let's not forget the iconic Star Wars soundtrack that blasted through the speakers, making every race feel like a high-stakes intergalactic showdown. Whether you were dodging Tusken Raider attacks or racing through the tight tunnels of Malastare, every second in Star Wars Racer Arcade was a white-knuckle thrill ride. It wasn't just a game for Star Wars fans, it was a game for anyone who loved the idea of racing through exotic, otherworldly environments at light speed. RC Proam, 1988. Before Mario Kart turned racing into a free-for-all with items and chaos, there was RC Proam, a game that brought radio-controlled car racing into arcades with a whole new level of intensity. Released in 1988, this game put players in control of tiny, zippy RC cars as they raced around tracks filled with obstacles, hazards, and plenty of opportunities to sabotage your competition. The game's isometric perspective gave players a clear view of the track and the action, while the fast-paced gameplay kept you on your toes. It wasn't enough to just be fast, you also had to be smart. The tracks were littered with obstacles like oil slicks, barriers, and even missiles, which added an element of strategy to the races. You could collect upgrades and weapons scattered around the track to boost your car's speed or take out your opponents, making every race a tactical battle as well as a test of driving skill. The game featured a wide variety of tracks, each more challenging than the last, with tight corners, jumps, and plenty of twists that kept you guessing. But the real fun of RC Pro-Am came from its multiplayer mode. Up to 4 players could battle it out in chaotic races, with friendships quickly dissolving as missiles flew and cars spun out on oil slicks. The controls were tight and responsive, making it easy to pick up and play, but tough to master as the difficulty ramped up. And the sense of speed was incredible for its time, giving players a real sense of zipping around the track at breakneck speeds. RC Pro-Am was a true arcade classic that blended racing with just the right amount of chaos, and it laid the groundwork for the kart racing games that would follow in its tyre tracks. Super Sprint, 1989. Released in 1989, Super Sprint was a top-down arcade racer that brought the thrill of Formula One to the arcades. But with a twist, this wasn't just about speed, it was about strategy, precision, and knowing how to navigate each twist and turn like a pro. The game's simplicity was its greatest strength. You controlled tiny cars on compact, looped tracks, with each race lasting only a few minutes, but every second counted. Unlike other races where wide open roads gave you room to breathe, Super Sprint packed the action into tight circuits that required quick reflexes and sharp turns. The top-down view gave players a bird's-eye perspective of the track, allowing you to see every corner, obstacle, and shortcut. The controls were easy to grasp, but mastering the game's tricky handling took practice, especially when it came to drifting through tight corners without slamming into the walls. What really set Super Sprint apart, though, was its multiplayer mode. With up to 3 players racing head-to-head on the same screen, the game turned into a battle of skill and wits, with every slight bump or crash potentially deciding the outcome of the race. The tracks themselves were filled with obstacles, from oil slicks to spinning gates, which added a layer of chaos to each race. And then there were the upgrades. After each race, players could use their points to boost their car's speed, handling, or acceleration, adding a strategic element to the game. Do you go all in on speed or focus on better control? Super Sprint wasn't just a test of racing skill, it was a tactical battle to see who could best manage their car's performance and outwit their opponents. Simple, fast, and incredibly fun, Super Sprint is a perfect example of how arcade racing doesn't need to be flashy to be thrilling. Roll Cage, 1999. By 1999, the arcade racing genre had seen its fair share of games, but Roll Cage was unlike anything before it. This wasn't just your standard racer, it was a gravity-defying, adrenaline-pumping battle of skill and chaos. In Roll Cage, you didn't just race on tracks, you raced on walls, ceilings, and through destructible environments. The cars, designed like futuristic, tank-like vehicles with wheels on both sides, could flip and keep driving no matter which way they landed. This opened up a whole new world of possibilities, as players could take shortcuts by driving up the sides of tunnels or even flipping over to dodge obstacles. The game's tracks were designed with this in mind, featuring massive jumps, tight curves, and destructible environments that kept every race unpredictable. Whether you were racing through futuristic cities or alien landscapes, the sense of speed was insane. Roll Cage wasn't just about staying on the road, it was about mastering the chaos. The game also featured an arsenal of power-ups, from homing missiles to shields, turning every race into a full-blown battle. You could target your opponents and send them spinning out of control, or use a shield to protect yourself from incoming attacks. The multiplayer mode was where Roll Cage really shined, with up to 4 players battling it out in fast-paced, gravity-defying races that were as much about survival as they were about speed. The graphics were stunning for their time, with detailed environments and smooth animations that made every race feel like a wild roller coaster ride. If you wanted an arcade racer that flipped the genre on its head, literally, Roll Cage was the game to play. San Francisco Rush 2049, 1999. By the time San Francisco Rush 2049 hit arcades in 1999, the Rush series was already known for its over-the-top stunts and adrenaline-pumping action. But this entry took things to a whole new level, quite literally. Set in a futuristic version of San Francisco, this game combined high-speed racing with gravity-defying stunts that made every race feel like a roller coaster on steroids. The tracks were filled with massive jumps, loop-de-loops, and hidden shortcuts, turning the iconic city's streets into an extreme playground where anything was possible. And then there were the wings. Yes, you read that right. Your car had retractable wings that allowed you to glide through the air after launching off ramps, giving you the ability to pull off insane aerial tricks and land on hidden paths. The wings added a whole new layer of strategy to the game, as you had to decide when to deploy them to gain an advantage or avoid crashing into oblivion. The game also introduced new futuristic cars, each with their own unique handling and speed, giving players plenty of options to choose from. The multiplayer mode was a blast, allowing up to 4 players to race head-to-head in chaotic, high-flying duels across the futuristic cityscape. And the graphics? For 1999, they were stunning, with smooth animations and detailed environments that made you feel like you were racing through a sci-fi action movie. Whether you were speeding through neon-lit tunnels, launching off sky-high ramps, or gliding through the air with your car's wings outstretched, San Francisco Rush 2049 was pure arcade racing mayhem. It wasn't just about crossing the finish line, it was about doing it with style and pulling off stunts that left your opponents in awe. Rad Mobile, 1991. Released in 1991, Rad Mobile wasn't just another arcade racing game, it was an immersive, cross-country adventure that took players on a high-speed journey from coast to coast. The game's sense of scale was impressive for its time, with players racing through a variety of American landscapes, from sun-soaked deserts to rain-soaked highways, all while dodging traffic and trying to outrun the competition. What set Rad Mobile apart from its contemporaries was its dynamic weather system and day-night cycle. As you sped through the game's winding roads, the weather could shift from sunny skies to heavy rain, forcing you to turn on your windshield wipers, and when night fell, you had to flick on your headlights to see the road ahead. These small details gave the game a sense of realism and immersion that was rare for arcade racers at the time. The game's cabinet was another highlight, featuring a full steering wheel, pedals, and even a rearview mirror, which added to the sense of being behind the wheel of a real car. Rad Mobile wasn't just about speed, it was about adapting to the changing conditions of the road. The tracks were packed with sharp turns, oncoming traffic, and plenty of obstacles that kept you on your toes. And then there was the Sonic the Hedgehog air freshener hanging from your rearview mirror, a subtle nod to Sega's burgeoning mascot before he became the superstar we know today. With its fast-paced action, immersive weather effects, and attention to detail, Rad Mobile was a standout in the arcade racing genre and paved the way for more immersive racing experiences in the years to come. Outrunners, 1992. If you loved the open-road, sun-soaked vibes of Outrun, then Outrunners was the ultimate upgrade. Released in 1992, this game took everything great about the original and dialed it up to 11. The bright, colourful visuals were even more vibrant, the cars were faster, and the sense of freedom was unparalleled. Unlike its predecessor, Outrunners featured a split-screen multiplayer mode that allowed two players to race against each other in real time, an absolute game-changer for the arcade scene. The game took you on a globe-trotting adventure, from the streets of Paris to the deserts of Egypt, with each route offering its own unique challenges and stunning scenery. Outrunners wasn't just a visual treat though, it was all about giving players options. At certain points in the race, you'd be presented with branching paths, allowing you to choose your route and explore different parts of the world, making each playthrough feel fresh and exciting. The cars themselves were also a joy to drive, with each vehicle having its own unique handling and style. Whether you were drifting around tight corners or speeding down wide-open highways, the sense of speed was exhilarating, and the music, classic Outrun, upbeat, catchy, and perfect for a carefree drive through exotic locations. The game's humour and personality shone through in its quirky passenger interactions, with characters cheering you on or getting frustrated if you weren't driving fast enough. Outrunners wasn't just a sequel, it was an evolution of the Outrun formula, offering more choices, more freedom, and more fun, all while keeping that signature laid-back vibe that made the original such a hit. Initial D Arcade Stage, 2002. Initial D Arcade Stage took the thrill of drifting around tight mountain corners and turned it into a full-blown arcade experience. Based on the popular Initial D manga and anime series, this game was all about perfecting the art of the drift. Released in 2002, Initial D Arcade Stage wasn't just about going fast, it was about mastering the intricate techniques needed to navigate narrow, winding mountain roads at breakneck speeds. The game featured iconic cars from the series, like the AE86, and allowed players to race through some of the most famous locations from the anime, including Mount Akina. But what really set this game apart was its dedication to accuracy. The drifting mechanics were spot on, requiring players to time their turns perfectly and maintain control of their car as it slid sideways through each corner. The arcade cabinet featured a full steering wheel and pedal setup, making the experience even more immersive. The game also introduced a card system, allowing players to save their progress and customize their cars, making each session feel like part of a larger journey. Whether you were battling it out against AI or challenging another player in multiplayer mode, Initial D Arcade Stage was all about precision, skill, and outsmarting your opponent. The graphics were impressive for the time, with detailed car models and realistic environments that made every race feel like a high-stakes drift battle straight out of the anime. And with the Initial D soundtrack blaring through the speakers, you couldn't help but feel like you were part of the action. For fans of the series and racing enthusiasts alike, Initial D Arcade Stage was the ultimate drift racing experience. Scud Race, 1996. When it comes to high-speed thrills, Scud Race, also known as Sega Super GT, took the arcade racing genre to new heights in 1996. This game was all about intense speed, tight controls, and the rush of adrenaline that comes from driving some of the world's fastest supercars. Unlike many arcade races that leaned into the fantastical, Scud Race was grounded in real-world racing, featuring officially licensed cars like the Porsche 911 GT2, Ferrari F40, McLaren F1, and Dodge Viper GTS. But just because the game focused on real cars didn't mean it was dull, quite the opposite. The tracks were filled with twists, turns, and larger-than-life elements, from underwater tunnels to roller coaster-like loops. that kept your heart racing and your eyes glued to the road. What really set Scud Race apart, though, was its attention to detail. The cars handled like the real thing, with each vehicle having its own distinct feel. Whether you were driving the nimble Ferrari or the heavy-hitting McLaren, you had to adjust your driving style to match your car's strengths. The game's visuals were ahead of their time, with beautifully rendered cars and tracks that looked as close to reality as you could get in 1996. The sense of speed was unparalleled, making every race feel like a high-stakes showdown. And let's not forget the multiplayer mode. Racing against your friends in linked arcade cabinets was an absolute blast, as you fought for every inch of track space, bumping, sliding, and drafting your way to victory. With its combination of real-world cars, cutting-edge graphics, and pulse-pounding gameplay, Scud Race cemented its place as one of the greatest arcade racing games of its time. Hangon 1989. Hangon wasn't just a game, it was a revolution in arcade racing, especially for motorcycle enthusiasts. Released in 1989, this game was a pioneer in many ways. And not just because it put players on 2 wheels instead of 4. Designed by the legendary Yu Suzuki, Hangon introduced the idea of immersive racing cabinets, allowing players to sit on a full-sized motorcycle replica and physically lean into turns as they raced. It was a brilliant piece of arcade engineering that made you feel like you were genuinely riding a high-speed motorbike, and that's what set Hangon apart from other racers of its time. The gameplay itself was straightforward but addictive. You raced against the clock through a series of stages, trying to reach checkpoints before time ran out. Each track took you through a variety of environments, from winding mountain roads to scenic coastal highways, with each stage getting progressively more difficult as you fought to maintain control of your bike at increasingly high speeds. The game's sense of speed was exhilarating, especially when you leaned into a corner, feeling the tension in the handlebars as you narrowly avoided wiping out. And then there was the iconic turbo boost feature. Hitting that extra speed when you needed it most felt like a shot of pure adrenaline. But Hangon wasn't just about speed, it was also about mastering the art of control. The game demanded precision in your movements, especially when it came to avoiding obstacles and navigating tight corners. The cabinet's physical design made this all the more immersive, with players leaning left and right to steer, which was a game-changing experience for 1989. Hangon didn't just raise the bar for arcade racers, it created a whole new standard for interactive arcade experiences. Marvelous verdict. From blazing fast supercars and futuristic flying machines to gravity-defying stunts and pedal-to-the-metal chaos, arcade racing games have given us some of the most memorable, heart-pounding moments in gaming history. These games didn't just challenge your driving skills, they pushed you to the limit with inventive tracks, unique vehicles, and unforgettable experiences that kept you coming back for more, coin after coin. Whether you were perfecting your drift in Initial D, blasting across the galaxy in Star Wars, Racer Arcade, or cruising through iconic American landmarks in Cruisin USA, each of these titles carved out a special place in our gaming hearts. So, if you're ever in the mood to relive the thrill of the arcade and chase that checkered flag one more time, these 25 games are the perfect pit stops on your road to victory.